Have you recession-proof your finances? In today's video, we're going to be looking at a possible recession and what you can do to really prepare for this. Now, when we start thinking about the United States, it could enter recession. A lot of economists are fearing that looking at the tariffs, looking at the downturn of the market, anticipation and Americans really need to prep. Even if it doesn't come, you're going to be well prepared. Now, when we started looking 3 years ago, looking after COVID-19, everything that happened, it was a pretty decent downturn in 2022. Then we look at 23 and 24, which was kind of crazy, seeing the stock market grow. Now, Russia, of course, invaded the Ukraine. Inflation was spiking, almost 9% interest rates. Inflation was kind of crazy. But knowing months past, no recession happened. We know this. We kind of skirted around with it for a while, thought it was going to be a soft landing, which the Federal Reserve was talking about. Then we're looking at importing and having those tariffs. Other factors, consumer confidence is at an all-time low, spooking the stock market, seeing a big pullback. And the probability of a recession went from 36% to 40% as it ended February. Now thinking of March, we're going to have to see exactly where it is. So when you start thinking of this, how can you recession-proof your finances? Well, the first one, getting rid of high interest debt. Now, paying off credit cards, of course, very much easier said than done. But if you have the resources to get rid of this and getting out the high interest debt, there are a multitude of ways. Now, when we look at the national average, when it comes to credit card debt, it is 24.2% according to LendingTree. You are paying almost 25% interest, which is insane. When you think of the market being in double digits, everybody, over the stars happy, yet people are still paying 24.2% on those credit cards. Putting a dent in this, you got to make more than the minimum payment. We're talking about doubling the payment, adding 100%, using a percentage of income. There are a multitude of ways to get rid of this and really eliminate it. This could include doing consolidations. If you take something that is at 24%, move that same balance and essentially take it to 9%, 10, 12%, whatever your unsecured borrowing limit is going to be, you could lower your interest rate dramatically, making it a lot easier to pay off when you're making those minimum payments or extra payments, getting rid of it. You could also consider doing a zero APR card. A lot of them are still out there, 15, 18, 21, 24 months to reduce and pay down the debt. And you could look at a home equity line of credit. If you do own a home, you might be around 7, 8% on a home equity, but a little bit cheaper than personal loans and not quite as cheap as the 0%. But if you want to play the 0% game, it can be very detrimental for a lot of people. Now, when it comes to eliminating debit or the credit card expenses, the big thing to remember is not using the cards. If you're in a program, if you're looking at debt consolidation, if you're doing transfers, if you're doing unsecured loans, home equities, you have to adjust your budget. You have to change the spending habits where you had cards, you got the balances on there, you knew exactly where they came from. Now it is time to wipe them out and eliminate them for good. Now, the second one, shoring up your savings. After and when you get those credit cards completely paid off, it's a good time to stock up and sit on a little bit of cash, taking the philosophy of Warren Buffett, sitting on, millions or billions of dollars. But for majority of us, 3 to 6 months in that emergency fund, roughly $33,000 is on average that you should have in that emergency fund, according to Investopedia. And overall, you don't want to worry about your job if something should happen. You know that you can cover a lot of expenses, even looking at minimal expenses. You can have this saved up and make sure that you're not going back to spending, that you're not going back to credit cards to supplement the time if something should happen. Now, emergency savings exist for times that are tough, and you have to have the justification of what a true emergency is. Yet 27% of Americans have no emergency fund, and most Americans cannot even cover an unexpected expense of around $1,000. Now, instead of thinking of that big number, the $33,000, what could you do on a monthly basis? Are we looking at $50, $100, $200 on a monthly basis, stockpiling it into the savings account? That way, if by chance a recession does occur, you are protected because you have the money set aside, and also ensure that you're putting it in a high yield savings account. Now, we have a couple links down below for M1 Finance. They do offer investment accounts, IRA accounts, as well as those high yield savings accounts, making sure that your money is growing while you're saving it. Now, third one, planning ahead for major expenses. If you know an expense is coming, you have to be planning for it. What I see traditionally is a lot of people will know that an expense is coming, whether it's going on vacation, whether it's, car repairs, they have an older car. A lot of people really overreact and they'll go into the mindset of borrowing money to pay for a vacation, borrowing money for a larger expense instead of saving money. So what this does is it creates a big hole within your financial plan where if you're taking on a payment that's $300, $400, $500 more than you're traditionally used to, now you have to make that additional payment to pay for whatever you're using the funds for, and you have to pay interest on top of that, meaning that if you're borrowing $10,000 or $15,000, chances are you're paying back, 12, 15, maybe even 20,000, depending on the term you're taking it out. Setting aside this money now for a major expense, knowing that it's coming, is an absolute game changer. And if by chance you can skirt the major expense, if you buy a cheaper car, if you're saving for a down payment, regardless of what it is, there was a time and a point in time where people would save money to buy the things that they wanted instead of just financing everything, the instant gratification that we see Americans so absolutely obsessed with, but they would actually save the money to buy the things and then they would own the things. And honestly, it gives you a lot more sense of worth. It really gives you a lot more well-being knowing that you saved the money, you had the discipline, you had the money. When you get the actual item, and I'm doing this with my kids as well, when you actually get the item, you have a lot more passion and a lot more love for it, which makes a big difference. Now, for me, I drive an older car. It's about 7, almost 8 years at this point. I know there's going to be a point probably in the next 2 or 3 years where without it being properly maintained, I am going to have to replace my vehicle, which means I need to put away about $300 to $500 a month as if I was making a car payment, knowing that in the next 2 or 3 years, that is going to be a big chunk of the car payment or the down payment for the vehicle. So I have a much lower payment, making sure that I know what expenses are going to be coming. Next one we look at is don't sell low. Guys, stock prices have been going down. This is not the time to sell. There's no reason, and it doesn't make sense other than the weird psychological thing that money does with our brain. When the stock market is down, when it is sinking, that is not the time you want to liquidate all of your assets, which is crazy because bigger picture, a majority of people will invest money when the stock market's going up. They will sell all of their assets when the stock market is going down, which again is kind of concerning because you want to be utilizing dollar cost averaging, meaning when the market's going up, you're buying. When the market's going down, you're buying. When you start looking at the stock market, we know it went into correction territory. The stocks will eventually rebound. They always come back. You have to hold on to them. And they've done incredible amounts of studies and a lot of things that if you're missing some of the rebound days, your portfolio is about 3 to 4% less than it would be if you are missing those key days where you have the very high highs. You do not want to be withdrawing from an aggressive portfolio or from a portfolio at all during a recession or a downturn. It is going to be detrimental for the long term. This is where retirees have less exposure to stock, which personally I do not agree with, where I feel like you should still have exposure to stock and a considerable amount of exposure to stock when you get into retirement. Because even if you think you retire at 62 or 65, you might have 85, 90 years of age to live. If you can still get some stock exposure, if you can still get some really solid growth out of those, going to make a big difference. And of course, the easiest thing when it comes to these portfolios, the easiest to really make recession-proof when it comes to investing is diversification. You have to remember the stock market is going to seesaw. It's going to have a lot of back. Balancing riskier stocks or ETFs with less volatile stocks really makes a big difference. And also having in that fixed income portion. This is the reason why I hold the QQQM. We've talked about this before. It is a big growth tech focus. VOO, we have the entire market. And then the HD, which is the last piece, which is the piece that is the fixed income alternatives or the fixed income generation through dividends. And we can see where this portfolio kind of balances out. When the stock market is doing incredibly well, those big tech stocks, the big growth are going to be up a lot higher. When the stock market pulls back, the HD and some of those fixed income alternatives, some of those dividend paying ETFs are not going to be as low as we've seen them. Now, it's not too late to start thinking of pulling out of equities if you see a downturn, but overall, I would not sell. The good thing is market volatility doesn't go in just one direction. You're going to have good days. You're going to have bad days. You're going to have ups and downs. It is really looking at the mix that you have within there and the diversification. The point is there's going to be a recession, and there will be, if it's not this year, it could be 3, 5, 10 years down the road. There's going to be a point where the stock market does pull back and does pull back considerably. Just have to be ready and have to be prepped for it. So, all right, guys, so that's going to do it for today's video. Let me know in the comments what you guys think. And as always, thank you guys for watching.